All right, so get ready because we are diving deep, deep into corporate America, but not the one you see on TV. No, sir. We're going to look at it through a really interesting lens, and that is the lens of Black women's experiences. You've shared with me some fascinating excerpts from Playing the Game While Black Womaning in Corporate America. This is a book by Nicole S. Palmer, and it's about way more than just trying to climb that corporate ladder. It's about really understanding all those unspoken rules, how to kind of sidestep all those landmines out there, and then ultimately, how to thrive in a system that, let's be honest, wasn't really built with you in mind.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's so fascinating about this book is how Palmer, she uses these chess analogies to really unpack this world, this corporate world. And so think of it this way, like each piece on this chessboard that you're encountering, from the pawn all the way up to the queen, it represents a different kind of colleague, right? And a different power dynamic that you have to kind of learn how to navigate.
Yeah, I love that, like a corporate chessboard. Okay, so let's start unpacking this chessboard a little bit. And I think one of the rules that really sets the tone here in the book is this idea that nobody talks about playing the game. That's rule number one. So it's like the elephant in the room, right? Everyone knows it's going on, but you can't really acknowledge it.
Right, exactly. It's like this unwritten code. And, for Black women especially, calling out these unspoken rules, I mean, that could be a career killer. Seriously.
Yeah.
And Palmer, she shares this story, like a personal anecdote, about how she was excluded from this major project that she actually initiated, even though she was the expert in the room. And the presenter that they chose, well, they weren't as knowledgeable, let's just put it that way. And the biggest difference between Palmer and the person they chose, it was their race. And so it really shows this frustrating reality that sometimes just acknowledging that there's a game being played can actually put you at a disadvantage.
Yeah, that's tough. It's like you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, And that kind of feeds right into rule number 2, which is there are no spectators. You can't just fly under the radar, even if you're just trying to do your job,
Exactly, and especially for Black women, there's this hypervisibility. So every action or even inaction is scrutinized, like they're under a microscope.
Yeah.
And then it's interpreted, and sometimes in ways that are completely off base. And Palmer even talks about being labeled stuck up, simply because she was quiet. And so it just shows how quickly people fill in those narratives, and often to the detriment of Black women.
Oh, I've totally seen that. Where people kind of fill in the blanks with their own assumptions. And then we get to this rule number 3, which is their best is your mediocre. I mean, honestly, that's just exhausting. The bar is always higher. Like, you have to be exceptional just to get to the starting line.
Right. It's like this double standard where Black women, they're expected to deliver excellence.
Mm-hmm.
That's the baseline. And while others, they're getting applauded for just meeting the minimum.
Yeah.
And I remember that anecdote that Palmer shares. She goes above and beyond on this project, and she gets a lukewarm response. Mm-hmm. But then a colleague who's less prepared gets showered with all this praise. Mm-hmm. Talk about demoralizing.
Yeah, wow.
This constant pressure to overperform can lead to burnout, self-doubt.
Yeah, you're constantly striving, always proving yourself. So, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with this constant pressure, this feeling like the game is rigged? I think that's where Palmer's analogy with the chessboard becomes really, really helpful.
Right.
Like understanding who are the players and what are their moves.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes even other Black women can become part of this dynamic, which is really unfortunate. And it leads us to this rule number 4, which is there can only be one. And it captures that, that scarcity mentality that we see so much in corporate America.
It's like there's only room for one Black woman at the table at any given time, and then it creates this internal competition instead of, collaboration.
So Palmer talks about encountering another Black woman in a technical role, and this woman she viewed her as a threat, and it just highlights how this internalized scarcity, which is fueled by limited opportunities, of course, how it can really turn potential allies into rivals, which is so disheartening because, we need each other to navigate this system.
Yeah, we absolutely do. We need to lift each other up. And then, just when you think you've got the rules figured out, they change on you. And that's rule number 5. Goalpost's gonna keep shifting. You think you're about to score and they just move the darn goal.
It's maddening. Palmer describes this situation where she was told she'd done everything she needed to do to get a promotion, checked all the boxes. And then she saw the promotion go to someone else. And get this, she ended up having to train this person. It just really underscores the need for flexibility and resilience, because the rules, they are always in flux, and it makes it really hard to gain a real foothold.
It's like you can never really be prepared. So is there even any point in trying to play the game at all?
that's where understanding these chess pieces, I think, becomes really, really powerful. Like knowing who you're dealing with and how to anticipate their moves. So for example, think about the king on the chessboard. Palmer calls the king the gatekeeper, and it could be anyone. It could be a high-level executive, or it could be that, seemingly unassuming executive assistant, the one who controls access to the CEO.
Yeah.
And black women often face even more hurdles with these gatekeepers than other people do. They have to prove themselves again and again and again.
Oh, I've definitely seen that. Okay, so then there's this other piece, the knight, which Palmer refers to as the accomplice. Now, this sounds like someone you really want on your side.
Oh, they can be invaluable. They work indirectly, often behind the scenes to advocate for you. And, having a knight in your corner can make a huge difference, especially when you're facing systemic barriers. But even with allies, you have to be prepared to face the reality of rule number 6, shade is inevitable.
Okay, now there's a universal truth, I've got to say. Like, there's no escaping the shade, especially for black women. Whether it's microaggressions or backhanded compliments or just this feeling of constantly being underestimated, it really does take a toll.
Yeah, Palmer doesn't sugarcoat it at all. She gives examples of, like being questioned about how to wash her natural hair or, having her achievements be met with all this skepticism. And it's a constant battle to be seen and to be heard and to be taken seriously. And that brings us to, I think, one of the toughest rules, but maybe the most empowering rule, which is rule number 7, ain't nobody coming to save you. It's a bit of a wake-up call, It's about owning your journey and realizing that you are your own best advocate.
Yeah, like you're responsible for your own success. But that doesn't mean you have to go it alone, right?
No, not at all. It's about being strategic.
Right.
And knowing how to really leverage your strengths and build a network of support, And that's where I think these chess piece analogies can be even more helpful. So let's talk about the pawn for a second. Often that represents somebody in like an entry-level role. And, they're often underestimated, but they have so much potential. They're the ones who are on the ground, learning all the ropes. And they really have an opportunity to start building those relationships early on.
Right. Those early connections can be so valuable. It's like building your network from the ground up. Okay, so we talked about the king as the gatekeeper. And you mentioned, that black women face maybe even more hurdles, with them. Any advice on how to navigate those power dynamics?
Well, it's tricky, for sure. You have to strike that balance between really showcasing your competence, but then also managing perceptions. Because remember, these gatekeepers, they hold the keys to opportunities. So you want to prove yourself, but you also want to be mindful of how you're being perceived. And sometimes it's about finding those subtle ways that demonstrate your value, without being overly assertive, which unfortunately, for black women can sometimes backfire.
Yeah. It's like you got to be strategic, All right, so we talked about the king. What about the bishop, who Palmer calls the operator? Oh, the operator. They're the ones who are kind of working behind the scenes. They're pulling strings, often in very specific areas of expertise. And, for black women, navigating this role can be really tricky because you need to be seen as competent, but you also need to be seen as approachable. So it's a delicate balance, but, mastering that balance can really give you a lot of influence.
Yeah, I can see that. So I'm starting to see how understanding all these different chess pieces, can really give you an advantage in this game. It's like you're learning the secret language or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about the rook then? Who is the player in this whole corporate chess match?
Oh, the rook is an interesting one. They're well established. They play by the rules, but they can be a powerful ally or really formidable opponent. And it really depends on how they see you,
So it's crucial to really understand their motivations. Are they threatened by you, or do they see you as a valuable asset? Reading those cues is really key to navigating that relationship.
It's like you're constantly having to read the room and adapt your strategy accordingly. Okay, so that's the rook, and then we've got the queen, or as Palmer calls her, the master. So what does it mean when a black woman reaches that level of influence?
Oh, it's a huge accomplishment, but it comes with a really unique set of pressures, Because a black woman in this position, she becomes a symbol, she's visible, she's under a lot of scrutiny, and every move she makes is analyzed. And so she has to be very strategic about how she uses her power, how she advocates for change, how she mentors others who are coming up behind her.
Oh, yeah. That's a lot of responsibility. It's like you're playing the game on a whole other level. So we've talked about all these chess pieces and, these different types of colleagues. But what about the colleagues who are straight up, opponents, the ones that make it feel like a battlefield.
Oh yeah, we can't forget about them. Palmer calls them out, she gives them names, and she even offers strategies for dealing with them. We've already talked about a couple of them, like the slick saboteur and a cunning confidant. And those can be especially difficult to deal with because they often operate under the radar, So it makes it really hard to even pinpoint what they're doing.
Yeah, it's like sneaky, underhanded stuff that can throw you off balance. You don't even know where the attack's coming from.
Exactly. And for Black women, the betrayal can feel even deeper when it comes from another woman, and especially another Black woman, because there's this expectation of sisterhood, of support. But Palmer reminds us that not everyone is going to be an ally. And, sometimes you have to protect yourself, even from the people that you thought you could trust.
It's a tough lesson, but it's so true. So it's about learning to read the signals and trust your instincts and just build up that resilience. Speaking of resilience, how do you deal with somebody like the blockade boss? The one who seems to be intentionally trying to block your path.
The blockade boss. They can be a real challenge. It might be a manager who consistently overlooks you for promotions, or a colleague who, controls access to resources and information. And dealing with them, it really requires a strategic approach, So first, I think it's really helpful to just try to understand, what's their motivation? Are they threatened by you? Are they just, clueless? If it's unconscious bias, maybe there's a way to open up a dialogue to kind of help educate them about their blind spots.
It's worth a shot, at least. But what if it's intentional? What if they're actively trying to hold you back?
Well, that's when you have to get a little bit more creative. You start building alliances in other departments. You showcase your skills in ways that kind of bypass the blockade. Or you even consider, maybe it's time to move on to a different environment, a place where your talents are really recognized and appreciated. Sometimes the best move is to just create your own path, create your own opportunities.
Right, you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them.
Yeah.
So now Palmer also talks about, this idea of protecting your reputation, which she calls your rep. Why is that especially crucial for Black women?
Well, because unfortunately their reputations are often subject to much harsher scrutiny. There's this expectation of perfection, and any misstep can be magnified and used against them. So Palmer advises, being above reproach, documenting your contributions really carefully, and being really proactive about managing your image.
It's almost like you have to build this fortress around your reputation, to protect yourself.
Yeah, it's not fair, but it's the reality of the game.
Oh.
And documentation is key. It's not just about keeping track of your achievements, it's about keeping records of conversations, of decisions, and any instances of unfair treatment. It's like your armor in a system that doesn't always play fair.
Yeah, it's like having a paper trail. So if anybody ever questions, your character or your work, you've got that evidence to back you up.
Exactly. And it can be as simple as, sending a follow-up email after a conversation just to summarize what was discussed, or, keeping a log of your accomplishments. It might seem tedious, but it can really be a lifesaver in the long run.
Okay, so protect your rep, build your network, and don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. It's a lot to juggle. So what about self-care? How do you avoid burning out in this constant game of corporate chess? Self-care, it's non-negotiable. Palmer stresses this throughout the entire book. You can't be your best self at work if you are running on empty. It's about setting boundaries, finding healthy ways to de-stress, and just really replenishing your energy. Remember, you can't pour from an empty cup.
That's so true. So easy to get caught up in the hustle, the pressure to perform, that we forget to take care of ourselves. Any practical tips on how to incorporate self-care into, a busy work life?
Well, it doesn't have to be these grand gestures, It could be as simple as taking a walk during your lunch break, or listening to a podcast that, that inspires you, or just setting aside, some time each evening to unwind and just disconnect from work. It's about finding those little rituals that nourish your soul and help you stay grounded.
Yeah, I love that. Little rituals, big impact.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've been talking about these individual strategies, for navigating this corporate world. But Palmer also talks about the need for systemic change, right? It's not just about Black women adapting to the game. It's about changing the game itself. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Real change requires addressing those root causes of inequity. So we're talking about increasing diversity in leadership roles, dismantling the policies and practices that perpetuate bias, and creating a culture where everybody feels valued and respected.
So creating a workplace where everyone has a fair shot, where your talent and your hard work is recognized no matter what your race or gender is.
Exactly. And it requires a collective effort. It's not just about Black women fighting for change. It's about everyone who believes in fairness and equality stepping up and being part of the solution.
It's about allyship. It's about using your privilege to amplify marginalized voices and challenge the status quo. So as we kind of shift into the final part of our deep dive, I want to zoom out a little bit and talk about some of the broader implications of what we've been talking about. Because, Palmer's book is focused on Black women's experiences, but I feel like a lot of the insights she offers are really universal, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I mean, anyone who's ever felt underestimated or overlooked, or like they're navigating a system that wasn't really designed for them to succeed, I mean, they can benefit from what Palmer has to say. These unspoken rules, these power dynamics, I mean, they exist everywhere, not just in corporate America.
It's about learning to recognize the patterns, right? Like learning to read the board and then developing your own strategies for success. It's almost like Palmer is giving us a playbook, a set of tools that we can use.
Yeah, and one of the most powerful tools, I think, that she offers is this reminder that you always have a choice. You have a choice in how you play the game. You can choose to internalize those limitations that are placed on you, or you can choose to challenge them, to rewrite the rules, to create your own path.
It's about taking back your power, even when you're in a system that seems like it's trying to hold you back. But real change, lasting change, that requires more than just individual effort, right? It requires some systemic shifts.
Oh, 100%. Palmer makes it clear that we have to dismantle those systemic barriers. I mean, we need more diversity, especially in leadership positions. We need more equitable policies and just a culture overall where everyone feels like they belong, that they're valued and respected.
So how do we move beyond, just talking about diversity and inclusion and actually create that kind of environment? What are some concrete steps that we can take?
Well, it starts with accountability. Organizations, they have to set clear goals. They have to track their progress and be transparent about the efforts that they're making.
Yeah.
Invest in training and development programs that address unconscious bias, promote cultural sensitivity, things like that.
And it's not just about having policies and programs, right? It's about creating a culture where people feel safe to speak up, where they feel like they can actually challenge bias and discrimination.
And that's where allyship becomes so important. It's about, those who have privilege, recognizing that privilege and using it to amplify those marginalized voices, to advocate for change, to really be an accomplice in that fight for equity.
It's about creating a network of support where everyone feels seen and heard and valued for who they are. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with this feeling that, okay, yeah, there are challenges, but we have the power to change things,
That's the key takeaway, I think, from Palmer's book. It's a wake-up call, but it's also a call to action. It's about understanding the game and playing it strategically, but it's also about working to change the rules of the game so that everyone has a fair chance.
Yeah, I love that. It's about creating a more just and equitable world, not just in our workplaces, but everywhere. So to our listener, if you're feeling inspired by what we've talked about today, if you're ready to make a move, what's one small step you can take today to make a difference? Maybe it's having a conversation with a colleague about a microaggression that you witnessed. Or maybe it's, seeking out a mentor who can help you with your career growth. Whatever it is, remember that even small actions can create big ripples of change.
Yeah, and if you're looking for more guidance, more insights, definitely check out Nicole Palmer's book, Playing the Game While Black Womaning in Corporate America. It is packed with, wisdom, strategies, and real-life stories that will resonate with, pretty much anyone who's navigated a complex work environment.
It's a book that will make you think, it will challenge you, and it will empower you to make a difference. Well, that's it for this deep dive. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed it. And remember, you've got the power to create your own path to success, whatever that looks like for you.